Hello, and welcome to the Sealark channel. Today I want to have a sensory blending experience with you. Have you heard of synesthesia? It's a condition that affects a very small percent of the population, in which people experience joined or multiple senses at once. So instead of just hearing a word I say to you, you might also taste that word. If you know more about synesthesia or have experienced it, please let me know in the comments. Today I thought it might be interesting to try to create a sensory blending experience, making some images of light changing, the dark night, sunsets, and also reading from one of my childhood favorite books, The Phantom Tollbooth, a scene called The Colorful Symphony, in which a conductor conducts a silent orchestra to bring in the light and color of the sunrise and the sunset. It's something very visceral for me. I think you'll enjoy it, so let's hop into doing some painting and a little story time and enjoy. This book tells the story of a sad boy named Milo who ends up going into a fantastic world through a toy toll booth that appears in his apartment after school one day. In this scene, we are working with the main character Milo, his watchdog companion, and also a character called Alec. Now let's hurry or we'll miss the evening concert. They followed him quickly up a flight of steps that couldn't be seen through a door which didn't exist. In a moment, they had left reality and stood completely in a different part of the forest. The sun was dropping slowly from sight, and stripes of purple, orange, and crimson and gold piled themselves on top of distant hills. The last shafts of light waited patiently as a flight of wrens found their way home, and a group of anxious stars had already taken their place. "Here we are," cried Alec, and with a sweep of his arm he pointed toward an enormous symphony orchestra. Isn't it a grand sight? There were at least 1,000 musicians ranged in a great arc before them. To the left and right there were violins and cellos whose bows moved in great waves, and behind them in numberless profusion the piccolos, flutes, clarinets, oboes, bassoons, horns, trumpets, and trombones and tubas were all playing at once. At the very rear, so far away they could hardly be seen, were the percussion instruments, and lastly, in a long lineup, one side off a steep slope, were the solemn bass fiddles. On a high podium in front stood the conductor, a tall, gaunt man with dark, deep-set eyes, and a thin mouth placed carelessly between his long-pointed nose and long-pointed chin. He used no baton, but conducted with large sweeping movements which seemed to start at his toes and work slowly up through his body along his slender arms and end finally at the tips of his graceful fingers. "I don't hear the music," said Milo. "That's right," said Alec. "You don't listen to this concert, you watch it. Now pay attention." As the conductor waved his arms, he molded the air like handfuls of soft clay, and the musicians carefully followed his every direction. "What are they playing?" asked Talk. "The sunset, of course. They play it every evening at this time." "They do?" said Milo quizzically. "Naturally," answered Alec, "and they also play morning, noon, and night. When, of course, it's morning, noon, or night. Why, there wouldn't be any color in the world unless they played it. Each instrument plays a different one, and depending, of course, on what season it is and the weather, the conductor chooses his score and directs the day. But watch, the sun's almost set, and in a moment you can ask Chroma himself." The last colors slowly faded from the western sky, and as they did, one by one, the instruments stopped until only the bass fiddles, in their somber, slow movement, were left to play the night, and a single set of silver bells brightened the constellations. The conductor let his arms fall limply at his side and stood quiet as the darkness claimed the forest. "That was a very beautiful sunset," said Milo, walking to the podium. "It should be," was the reply. "We've been practicing since the world began," and reaching down, the speaker picked Milo off the ground and set him on the music stand. "I am Chroma the Great," he continued, gesturing broadly with his hands, "conductor of color, majesto of pigment, and director of the entire spectrum." "Do you play all day long?" asked Milo. "Ah, yes, all day, every day," he sang out, then pirouetted gracefully around the platform. "I rest only at night, and even then, they play." "What would happen if you stopped?" asked Milo, who didn't quite believe that color happened that way. "See for yourself," roared Chroma. He raised both hands high over his head. Immediately the instruments that were playing stopped, and all at once, all color vanished. The world looked like an enormous coloring book that had never been used. Everything appeared in simple black outlines, and it looked as if someone with a set of paints the size of a house and a brush as wide could stay happily occupied for years. The instruments began again, and the color returned. You see what a dull place the world would be without color, but what pleasure to lead my violins in a serenade of spring green, hear my trumpets blare out blue sea, and watch the oboes tinted all warm yellow sunshine. And rainbows are the best of all, and blazing neon signs, and taxicabs with stripes, and soft muted tones of a foggy day. We play them all. Now really, I must get some sleep, Chroma yawned. We've had lightning, fireworks, and parades for the last few nights, and I've had to be up to conduct them. But tonight is sure to be quiet. Then putting his large hand on Milo's shoulder, he said, "Be a good fellow and watch my orchestra till morning, will you? And be sure to wake me at 5:23 for the sunrise. Good night." Milo and his companions all fall asleep, and Milo has some devious plans. He figures he'll conduct the orchestra without Chroma the Great, and we get to see what happens when a new conductor comes to conduct the sunrise. So as everyone slept on, Milo stood on tiptoes, raised his arm slowly in front of him, and made the slightest movement possible with the index finger of his right hand. The time was now 5:23 a.m. As if understanding his signal perfectly, a single piccolo played a single note, and off in the east, a solitary shaft of cool lemon light flickered across the sky. Milo smiled happily and cautiously crooked his finger again. This time 2 more piccolos and a flute joined. 3 more rays of light danced into view, and with both hands he made a great circular sweep in the air and watched with delight as the musicians began to play at once. The cellos made the hills glow red, and leaves and grass tipped with a soft pale green as violins began their song. Only bass fiddles rested as the entire orchestra washed the forest in color. Milo was overjoyed because they were all playing for him, and just the way they should. Won't Chroma be surprised, he thought, signaling the musicians to stop. I'll wake him now. But instead of stopping, they continued to play even more loud than before, and each color became more brilliant than he thought possible. Milo shielded his eyes with one hand and waved the other desperately, but the colors continued to grow brighter and brighter and brighter until even more curious things began to happen. As Milo frantically conducted, the sky changed from slow blue to tan, then rich magenta red. Flurries of light green snow began to fall, and the leaves on the trees and bushes turned vivid orange. All the flowers suddenly appeared black, the gray rocks became lovely soft chartreuse, and even peacefully sleeping talk changed from a brown to a magnificent ultramarine. Nothing was the color it should have been, and yet the more he tried to straighten things out, the worse they became. I wish I hadn't started. This is me when I'm messing up a painting. A pale blue blackbird flew by. There doesn't seem to be a way to stop them. He tried very hard to do everything just the way Chroma had done, but nothing worked. The musicians played on faster and faster. The purple sun raced quickly across the sky. In less than a minute, it set once more in the west, and then, without any pause, rose again in the east. The sky was now a quiet yellow, and the grass a charming shade of lavender. 7 times the sun rose, and almost as quickly disappeared as colors kept changing. In just a few minutes, a whole week had gone by. At last, the exhausted Milo, afraid to call for help and on the verge of tears, dropped his hands to his sides. The orchestra stopped. The colors disappeared. And once again it was night. The time was 5:27 a.m. "Wake up, everybody! Time for the sunrise!" he shouted with relief and quickly jumped from the music stand. "What a marvelous rest," said Chroma, striding to the podium. "I feel as though I slept a week." My, I see we're a little late this morning. I'll have to cut my lunch hour short by 4 minutes. He tapped for attention, and this time the dawn perfectly proceeded. "You did a fine job," he said, patting Milo on the head. "Someday, I'll let you conduct the orchestra yourself." I hope you guys enjoyed some of the blended sensory experience of watching these paintings and the light and color change while we were reading about a conductor and orchestra doing the same in Phantom Tollbooth. If you would like to purchase any of these, you can check them out at robinsealark.com. I'm also on the internet at robinsealark, so find my socials and subscribe. And I will see you in the next video. Bye.